Welcome back to the Selfish Griever podcast. Today is the second Wednesday episode of season 2, and I hope that you enjoyed last Friday's episode with my personal grief counselor, Carol. I hope that gave you some valuable information and insight, and if you didn't get a chance to listen to it, you can always go back and check it out. We talked a lot about what counseling should and shouldn't look like and when it might be appropriate for you to seek those steps. And so on the heels of that, I wanted to talk today about what I feel like was really the next step for me on my grief journey in recognizing when to let things go, when things didn't serve me anymore. And I get complimented frequently about the vulnerability that I bring on these episodes. And part of that feels natural because I know how personal grief is, and it would be impossible for me to really speak to it if I wasn't talking about my authentic personal experience with my son dying. But if I was honest, I still edit. There are things that I have not talked about because they're hard to talk about, because I maybe don't have all the answers, or because sometimes the answers aren't pretty. They aren't things that make you feel good. This year when Maverick started kindergarten and I had to go school supply shopping for him, which was frankly not nearly as exciting because I just did it all over the Target app, but it made me think back to when I was probably about 12, how excited I was about school supply shopping. I was that kid who loved a newly sharpened, fresh pencil. And I remember that I would dread the moment that would come when I would inevitably make a mistake and have to use the eraser for the first time, because then it wasn't going to be flat and pristine and unmarked. My little inner 12-year-old self loves for things to be clear, neat, packaged together in these nice little answers that make life feel safe and clear. But you and I both know that that's not how life works out. And so it's hard to talk about the ugly parts. But I think the truth is that there's more of us out there experiencing these ugly parts and feeling like we're the only ones, because it's not something everybody wants to talk about. I think commonly it gets brought up about the loss of friends and even family that grievers experience following a traumatic loss. But I feel like it generally kind of gets whitewashed in just, oh, I don't speak to them anymore. Or, oh, they stopped showing up for me. And sometimes, in a lot of cases, it's wrapped up in anger that these people that you thought cared for you, that you thought loved you, didn't show up for you anymore. And I think that it's really important to not just stop at that surface level of the actions that were or were not taken, but to really consider why. Why did that person stop showing up? Is that because they changed? Is that because you changed? Or is it because there was always this pre-existing element in your relationship that was easy to overlook when you were whole, when you had abundance of energy to devote to friendships and relationships. And that when all of that was depleted, when you're in the midst of grieving, that then these holes, really, in your relationship started to become more obvious. And I feel like, at least the conditioning that I had, was that I needed to try harder. I had that common theme throughout my life from childhood. I was raised to consider everybody else's feelings. How were my actions impacting other people? What could I do differently that would make them feel more comfortable? What was I not trying hard enough at, and that was why I wasn't succeeding? And I tried to apply that logic in the beginning of my grief journey. In some menial ways, I kept trying to show up to a mom's group I had been a part of. And every time that I felt uncomfortable, I just told myself, well, you just need to try and go one more time. You just need to keep going, and it'll get better. It'll get easier. It won't hurt so sharply. The stuff that gets discussed there won't seem so weird anymore. It won't feel so foreign, like you're painted black in a sea of white. And unfortunately, I kept making myself go for months before I finally gave myself the permission that if I didn't enjoy it, that if it wasn't serving me, to let it go. But I have to say that I experienced that similarly with some of my family members. I wish I could say that people showed up at my door, continuing to offer help and support after all of the well-wishers were gone in the beginning. But that's not what happened. And I wish I could say that I was given all the space and time that I needed to process. But that didn't happen either. And I'm not saying this because I want to sling mud at the people who didn't show up for me. It's not because I want you to look at me and think, oh, poor Whitney, she didn't have support. It's because these aren't the pretty parts. And I think that there are other people out there experiencing similar situations, and you start to feel really alone. And at a certain point, I had to make some hard decisions. And the decisions weren't hard because I didn't know what I needed to do for myself and for my son. The decisions were hard because the people around me are so conditioned themselves that they couldn't see why I was making the choices that I was. And so I was portrayed as being unreasonable, as being dramatic, as being self-centered. And that's hard. It's hard to be in that place when nobody else is acknowledging and supporting the choices that you're making. And at a certain point, you have to decide that you're the one who's satisfied with the effort that you've put forward into a relationship, and also an honest assessment of what you've gotten back out of it. I can say with a completely clear conscience that I spent a lot of time thinking about my family dynamics, thinking about that it goes back generations. It's not just me that has experienced relationships that were less than supportive. And after Orion died, and I didn't have the capacity anymore to put forth the lion's share of effort to make relationships work, to always travel to where they were so that we could see each other, to always fit into their schedule so that we could be together, to always make excuses when they canceled because something else came up, to always stuff my disappointment when I would show up somewhere and it turned out it wasn't just quality time with us, it was a group event. When I realized that it didn't matter how often I tried, how much I censored myself, that it was never gonna be the relationship that I dreamed of, and that I deserve to have relationships that I dream of. I don't have to settle for what someone else is just willing to give me, especially if I've communicated repeatedly that I want more. And so I've made tough choices. I can honestly say I don't regret any of them. I don't regret the time that I took space and stopped speaking to people because I had to safeguard my own well-being ahead of their feelings. I don't regret that there are relationships in my life that I have decided to completely sever because there is no progress being made. And at this point in life, I don't believe that progress is possible. I don't regret that I've made choices that are going to change the trajectory of my son's life so that there's not a repeat of the generational experiences that have happened in my family over decades. And I don't regret when I've made choices to alter the pattern of my life to support my happiness above societal norms, above expectations of oaths and the standard blueprint of how your life should be. I will say it's hard though when there's people who don't support you, who try to minimize what your personal life experience has been in these different relationships and dynamics, and then who try to undermine your choices, who try to insist that you're wrong, that you should give that person another chance because they're related to you, that you should take your vows more seriously, that they know better than you, even though they're not in that relationship with you. Because I wasn't raised to trust in myself first. I was conditioned to believe that my choices were okay as long as they followed the status quo, especially in regards to whether or not my grandparents, parents, aunts and uncles, whatever authority figures that came before me in the family agreed with my decision. But after Orion died, it became so blatantly clear that I am the only one living my life. I'm the only one who knows what I had to go through to make it to this point. I'm the only one who knows how many dark nights there were, how hard I fought. I'm the only one who knows how little support I felt, or how greatly supported I did feel. I'm the only one who knows how crushed I was when a loved one asked me if I was just going to be sad forever. And you're the only one who knows for you. Your story is not my story, even if we're both grieving parents. Maybe you can find more pros than cons if you're having to deal with relationship dynamics that are less than ideal. That doesn't mean you have to do what I did and cut things off. But I do want you to know that if there's feelings you're having about things, situations that you're thinking, this is not right, this is not making me feel whole, this hurts every time I have to interact with this person, you have free license to stop doing that. And that can be whole groups of people. That can be just one person. And you don't have to back down just because somebody else can't understand why you're making the decisions you're making. Because they're not living your life. They're not feeling what you're feeling. They don't have your perspective or your experiences. I think there's things that I really want to say that I'm afraid to. That's my conditioning that's still in place. Because even though I've made a lot of progress, I still have more work to do. I still feel anger and resentment when I think about all the people in my life who still put themselves first, who couldn't look at me and recognize that what I've lived through is something they can't even imagine. And part of me wants to sit them down and wave it right in front of their face. I want to tell them to imagine their child, who is grown now, but was once 2.5 years old. I want them to think about their favorite binky, their favorite blanket, their favorite toy. I want them to think about the nickname we called them when they were little. And then I want them to imagine placing that favorite toy next to their child's body in a coffin. And knowing that favorite toy is what was going to keep them company for the rest of their time on this earth. Want them to think about the nickname we gave them, the reasons why, and that that's over. That you're never going to see their smile again or give them a hug. And then I want them to ask themselves, would they have been able to get out of bed after that? Would they be sad forever? But I feel like that's not going to change anything. And so the only thing that I can change is me. I can change my expectations of people. I can change my exposure to certain people. And I can work on accepting that removing those people from my life is not the end of the world. It doesn't make me a bad person. It's not robbing my son Maverick of family that he deserves to get to know. It's not something I need to guilt myself over. And if it's a choice that you end up coming to regret, you can make amends. But I can tell you, I haven't regretted any of my choices thus far. And I believe in energy and the energetics of life. And it is true that when you release those things that don't serve you anymore, those friendships, those relationships, those activities, you are creating more space for new energy to come in, for new people to become friends, for new relationships that support you in the way you wish you were supported, and for new activities that you actually enjoy doing that light you up. Because after Orion died, and I was asking myself, how am I going to find a way to move forward? I realized I was not going to be able to do it if I was devoting the majority of my energy every day into forcing things to work, to happen, to move. I realized I was going to need to shift things because I was going to need the majority of my energy to support me and creating a life that I actually enjoy, that I'm not struggling through every day, wishing that things were different. Because I can't bring Orion back. There are things I absolutely cannot change. But I'm not willing to settle to keep the things that I can change that don't bring me joy anymore. And I don't think you should either. I think every single one of us deserves better. And we should be fighting for that every day.